So my name is Marshall. I am the facilitator of the Experience More tour, and what I get to do is talk to amazing people in the outdoor industry. And today we are here to talk with Rosario, who is a director at HOKA. And what that means is he oversees several business units at HOKA, which is gives him a very unique perspective and also has the ability to steer the direction. So this is going to be really fun to be able to chat with and listen to what he has to say, and then also maybe give him some input, as everybody's always listening all the time. So with that, let's bring into the conversation. There you are. How are you doing?
Hi, Marshall. First of all, it's my honor to be here to chat about shoes. I love talking about shoes. And also a shout out to the Gore team for their amazing partnership. And to call out my HOKA teammates, especially the FERs who are road warriors and they get out there and make sure that all of our retail associates and sales people are fully versed on HOKA product and are confident in their ability to talk about it and get our consumers fired up.
Yeah, it is. There's a great team that you've assembled that's out there. And then also, I love that all these retailers around here with us today, they're very curious and everybody wants to know how to speak about this stuff and get folks into the right shoes. So let's kind of explore some of that. But before we get into the tech of some of this product, I'd love to learn more about you and yourself and how you've kind of gotten into that role. So first, let's just begin with your title. What is your official title at
Yeah,
Hoka?
so my official title is Director of Hike and Kids HOKA product footwear. So I'm responsible for the long-term strategies around both the hiking product and also the kids product. Hike existed before I got to Hoka, but I've really had the privilege of starting kids from scratch. So that's been a really fun adventure that has a lot of long-term uh, growth potential for the brand, but it's also really exciting being a dad myself to see future Hoka athletes getting into Hoka products early.
It is really heartening to see some of the tech that's going into the
Yeah.
kids' products, incorporating invisible fit, for instance, in the
Yeah.
kids on a kappa. Like that's very forward thinking, I think, and unusual. Very, it's got to bring the industry forward and get some of these kids out there and make sure they're comfortable in the outdoors. I love it as a dad as well. So thank you, for
Yeah.
that. And so you've said that Hike was at Hoka before you started, but how long have you been at Hoka, and what has been your career trajectory to get you into this position?
Yeah, so great question, Marshall. I'm gonna turn the time machine way back
Okay, let's do it.
and we'll talk about where I started. So I have a soft spot for retail team members because I started my footwear journey in retail. When I was finishing up at the University of Oregon, I worked at a department store in the shoe department. I got thrown in there by accident. And like most things in life, serendipity takes over. And so that was the start of my journey. And then after that, I went into the buying department and learned a little bit about the mechanics of buying and
Mhm.
running a business. And along the way, I became a tech rep for the brand called Reebok. And a job opened up to be an associate product line manager in Boston. So I moved from Portland, Oregon to Boston, which is the furthest you could get.
Yeah, that's a cultural shift as well.
Yeah, huge. And I lived in Boston for 12 years and I worked my way up to a director role. And then an amazing opportunity came up. I'd always been passionate about the outdoors, and an opportunity came up to work for a middle tier brand called High Tech. And so I moved to London and worked for High Tech for 6 years. And then after that, we wanted to come back to the US. So my family and I migrated back to Michigan, where I worked for Merrill for a couple of years. And then I transitioned over to Teva, moving to California, where I was the director of product there for 4 years.
Wow.
And so I've been at Hoka now for 6 years. So that's a little bit of a journey. And finally, I'm back to Portland. So I've kind of went around
Yeah.
the horn and back to Portland.
And picked up so much wisdom and experience along the way, which is pretty cool from all different aspects of the industry, right?
Yeah.
And so you've seen it all and been able to apply that. And it shows, right? We can see this hike product really getting sophisticated at Hoka,
Yeah.
and bringing that perspective in is absolutely special. So you've been around, right? And now you're at Hoka. What is like really unique about working at Hoka? What's something that's just different about Hoka versus some of the other brands you've been at?
Probably the thing that I love the most, besides the amazing people on our teams. I mean, if you meet Hoka people, you know they're a special group. So I want to make sure I call that out. But beyond that, I think the brand itself is such a innovative brand. It was born as a paradox. The world was moving towards barefoot, low stack height
Yep.
footwear.
Yeah.
And here was this brand going the absolute opposite direction, right? Chunky shoes. And I just love that Hoka has sort of built a following based on something really unique and functional and truly differentiated. You can feel the Hoka difference, which is a special thing. And anyone who's been in the footwear business knows that when you get a brand that has sort of that touch point with the consumer that's authentic,
Mhm.
that it's something magical and special.
Yeah, and it is magical because you can see it's starting to permeate every aspect of people's lives, whether they're a trail runner, a road runner, now hike, and then I see nurses in it, and I see,
Yeah,
workers in them, right? Like it's everywhere. I think once you touch
yeah,
that brand, you're in, right?
yeah, totally.
And what is it do you think is special about that DNA that really does work well in all these different categories?
Yeah, so so I know some of you have been on the call with Melanie, and she gave you guys an awesome, I'm sure, tech session around the build of the Kaha 3. But for those who weren't at that, I'm just going to do a quick kind of summary. But we call it the heart of Hoka, and there's really three things that make a Hoka shoe special. One is that every Hoka shoe has a very cushioned midsole. Um, and we know why that is, right? Cushioning equals comfort.
Hmm.
So that's a big part of our story is the comfort that our shoes deliver. But there's a couple of other things that are part of the secret sauce. The second thing is that you'll see that every Hoka shoe has a rocker profile.
Yeah.
You know, um, and the analogy I would use is it's the difference between sitting in a regular chair versus a rocking chair, right? A rocking chair has that sort of fluid back and forth. And you get that in a Hoka shoe the moment you put it on and take a few steps. And the last thing that every Hoka shoe has is what we call the active foot frame. And the analogy I would use there is that if you're on a stand-up paddleboard, you're sitting on top of the water. But if you're in a canoe or a kayak, you're actually sitting inside and surrounded by the water. And so every Hoka shoe has active foot frame, which means that you're actually sitting inside the shoe, not on top of the shoe.
What
And
is
those three magical things are really the secret sauce. And we vary those depending on what the shoe is intended to do to really deliver an amazing experience underfoot.
Right, and so this is that framework you're going to get in every Hoka shoe, but they're going to be tuned differently, whether it's a race day shoe or whether it's a trail or whether it's a hike or something like the transport, right? As you're,
Exactly.
yeah, but you'll always find that in there. And I do think it's important to point that out to customers as well,
Yeah, for sure.
that they can experience that, right? And then pick and choose where they want to pick that tuning, right? How they want to
Yeah.
experience that in their day to day. Well, as we're still talking about Hoka in general, like you have this great perspective at Hoka now because you get to sort of see every part of it. He's focusing on hiking kids, but
Yeah.
I'm sure you see what's going on next door.
Yeah.
Um, what's something about the Hoka brand that you kind of just wished everybody knew? Like it's just not out there yet, and you really want to get that out there.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I love about our brand is that we're hyper focused on the consumer. Um, Everything we do is geared towards making their experience in whatever they're doing, whether it's bombing down a trail, um, running a first 5K, or going on an extended backpacking trip, whatever it is, and everything in between. Um, we are focused on how do we do it to inspire a better life and to do it with real authenticity so that, I always use the thought that if I were to blindfold you and you put on a HOKA shoe on one foot and a competitor's shoe on another foot, you should be able to tell without knowing which is on which foot where the HOKA shoe is, meaning those three things that I touched on really deliver something special and unique underfoot. And if we can do that, then we've achieved success. And if we missed, then our team needs to go back and figure it out so that we can achieve that goal.
So really focused on that consumer experience, right? They should know
Yeah.
they're in a Hoka. They should appreciate that they're in a Hoka. And how does that express itself in day to day? What's like an example of being consumer focused that you think is unique to your job?
Yeah. So I think, you know, as product people, we'd love to say everyone buys our shoe to run a marathon or a half 5K. But the truth is, a lot of people wear our shoes just for running their daily lives. Someone might use the shoe to train for a 5K, but they might also use it to dog walk and run their errands. We've touched on this that nurses and doctors love our product because if you're on your feet a lot, like
Yeah,
they are, you appreciate the technology that's in the product. And it really does make a difference at the end of the day after you've been on your feet for 12 hours that you can go home and not feel pain in your feet and things like that. So, experientially, that's a thing we really focus on is to make sure we deliver on that HOKA promise.
yeah. And when it comes to looking at like the components that you're putting into that to deliver that Hoka promise, what are you considering when you're working with like either different leathers or different textiles? Gore-Tex is an example, right? Vibram is another one. What are you looking at and sort of thinking about in that?
Yeah, that's another great question, Marshall. So we talked about tuning, right? So we tune all of the products from the outsole to the midsole. Sometimes the midsoles have multiple layers of foams, and each of those layers have different properties, either to be lighter or to be more structural, or to be more durable. Those are all really important properties that we use to like tune out the product, and including sock liners. And then, of course, in the upper, the meshes, like the mesh we use on a road running shoe is going to be ventilated, lightweight. The mesh we use on a hiking shoe might be more durable, might be more resistant to abrasion and um, cuts and things like that that you might um, experience if you're actually walking on a trail where there's a twig sticking out and your shoe goes by it, right?
Yeah,
A general road running shoe would probably get sliced, but the meshes we use in hiking products tend to be of more durable yarns so that they are less prone to cuts and tears and more abrasion resistant.
right.
Those are all like those little nuances that we work very diligently and above all, we try to make our product look great. We have a running joke on our team is that no matter how functional it is, if it doesn't look great, you're never going to get the initial pickup off the shelf. So we want to make sure that our products also look aesthetically pleasing. It's very important.
Well, we're about to talk about a beautiful shoe, the Kaha 3, that is very
Yes.
jumps off the wall for sure. Maybe not
Yeah.
literally, but figuratively jumps off the wall with the look and the color. Um,
Yeah.
but before we do, I do have a question that came up that I'd love to address. Joanna's asking about, specifically around the tuning around drop. And I know
Yeah.
this isn't your field necessarily in like the Clifton, but she's noticed that the Clifton drop has changed a little bit over time. And when you're approaching drop, how are you thinking about that, right? Because you are thinking about stack
Yeah.
height and drop and these types of things a little bit. And
Yeah. So is the question around the new Clifton?
yeah, the Clifton 10 has a drop of 7.2 for women, and 8 for men, and it was a 5, so it went to a slightly higher drop, is
Yeah.
what she's saying. And again, I know Clifton isn't your
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
wheelhouse, but I'm sure you've heard about it.
Yeah. Well, so one thing that has happened is that recently we've shifted the way we measure drop.
Hmm.
So those previous numbers from older shoes did not include the sock liner and the
There you go.
strobel board.
Yeah,
And for that reason, it seems artificially low. But when we measure it, in the new way, which is how all the brands have sort of standardized, which includes the outsole, the midsole, the strobel, and the sock liner. It did change those numbers. So
Yeah,
the last on the Clifton 9 was the same,
yeah.
which generally means the drop is about the same.
So
Yeah.
that explains some of those number changes, and I
Yes.
do like I guess it more in alignment, especially as we're starting to use sock liners or
Yeah.
insoles as they're also known, um, that really are designed to be kept in the shoes, right? You're not replacing
Yes.
them with aftermarket sock liners because
Yeah.
and we're gonna talk about that in the Kaha, like the extremely high
Yeah.
end sock liner you opted into in this shoe. So.
Yeah.
Um, and so let's dive into the Kaha and hike in general, and let's begin by kind of staying a little bit sort of 30,000 foot in hike. What are you seeing as the general trends in hike, and how is Hoka responding to these general trends?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest shift that we've seen in the outdoors over the last 5 years, Marshall, is that the consumer isn't just the person who wants to disappear into the wilderness. And I'm saying that to be humorous, but the reality is that there's a whole new audience that's come to the outdoors. They've been tagged as the casual participant.
Mhm.
They're not looking to isolate themselves in their activity. They actually want their activities to be social. So this would include people going on a morning hike on a weekend with their friends and their dog, and then afterwards going to a cafe to have brunch, or maybe go chill out and watch a baseball game, whatever it is,
Yeah.
right? And I think that idea of this less intensive and more social aspect is the big shift that's happened in the outdoors. And we want to make sure that our products can inspire that sort of living and also be additive in your daily life. So, you know, even with the Kaha, we did colorways that would be easy to do on wear on a trail hike, but then also wear to the art museum if you chose, because you were on a travel trip with friends.
Yeah, it's that people are living closer maybe to where they recreate. They're maybe spending a half day in a trail, half day out of a trail. They just want one pair of shoes, or maybe and I'm seeing cities develop more and more trail systems. So it is more accessible now than ever. And
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that the product is less functional, by the
right,
way.
yeah,
Yeah, we want to make sure that it's every bit as functional. So the Kaha 3, I would argue, is more functional than the first Kaha that we did. But we've done it in a more stealthy way to allow you to kind of crisscross those different events in your day.
yeah. And so you are getting different products as well based on. I mean, it's really these specialized products almost to allow folks to choose, right? If I am going into the wilderness for 3 days, there is a product for me. If I
Correct.
am primarily going to work in my shoes, but maybe getting a short hike, like in Portland, right? You have,
Yes.
I think it's like Forest Park there in the middle of
Yes.
town, right?
Yeah,
Maybe I'm
Forest
going
Park.
for a lunchtime hike, right? And so there's different shoes for those people.
Correct.
And again, that comes into the tuning that you referenced and how that looks and feels.
Yeah. And a
Um,
big part of that tuning has been really working very closely with the Gore team to develop, for example, the Kaha 3 is our first true mid-cut hiking boot that incorporated invisible fit. And, the Gore team has been incredibly instrumental and also strategically a great partner to help develop that, engineer it to deliver a great end-use performance experience. So, um, it looks like every other Kaha, but the truth is that it's got a lot of great new bells and whistles, including invisible fit, to really bring the experience to the next level.
Yeah, let's comb through some of this, right? My
Yeah.
understanding is that the Kaha is doing quite well as in sell through, which is great, right? It's nice to release your child into the world and have them be successful. And what are some of the features that you're hearing are really resonating with customers, things that folks are drawn to that is working in the shoe?
Yeah, I think the first and probably the most important thing is comfort.
Okay.
Um, you know, if you imagine someone who is going to go for a 7 mile hike in the morning on a Saturday, and they're at their end point, and the shoes are not comfortable, where they've got to turn around and come back, the last half of this hike is going to be very miserable.
Mhm,
So comfort is a big driver for us in the way we engineer the all of those tunable elements.
mhm,
Um, so that's a big thing that we work on. The other thing that consumers really want is product that is durable. So nobody wants to buy a hiking boot that needs to be replaced 6 months later. So, that's why, for example, in the Kaha, we use full grain nubuck that is high quality,
mhm.
that's going to be super durable. And then the element of Gore-Tex Invisible Fit is a huge comfort delivery vehicle for us, because we know that with Invisible Fit, you don't have that gap between the membrane and the shoe. Those have been fused together.
Right,
So the product is more breathable, less likely to feel baggy, doesn't absorb water because even in a traditional waterproof construction, if you have that gap layer, sometimes that can trap water, and you don't get that because there is no gap layer. And lastly, it makes the product more ventilated, meaning allows the moisture vapor to transmit from the inside of the shoe to the outside a little easier because again, you don't have that gap layer for
right.
the moisture vapor to travel through.
Less layers to kind of resist evaporative transport, right? It's easier to push it
Exactly.
through. There's not even that air gap would be something that the you'd have to get through.
Yeah.
And you don't have that anymore. Yeah, I mean, I personally am an absolute stoker on Invisible Fit, and in fact, kind of
Yes.
snobby about it at this point. And to see it coming in something like the Kaha 3, it was just a delight. And to be able to offer this in a mid and a low with
Yeah.
Invisible Fit, with the new gasket technology, allowing the tongue to open and close, is really special. Um,
Yeah. And a shout out to the Gore team. They really, they without them, it would not have been possible. They really work very diligently with our engineering teams and their engineering teams
yeah,
to really explore this possibility. And I'm going to show you a low colorway. I touched on how we use color to
yeah,
maybe
look at that thing. Yeah,
differentiate something from the hike wall. So here's a all pink women's Kaha, which I think is a good example of a shoe that can live on the trail because it's a light color, doesn't show dirt as well. Um, like if you wore a black colorway on the trail, you would see every smudge, but on this, it's stealthy. And then you can wear it to go do the rest of your day if you want.
yeah, that is a beautiful colorway and really cool how you match the foams with the
Yeah,
leather, right? With the TPO toe cap, like all of
yeah.
that is it's not that's not easy to do to get all those colors matched
No,
up.
it takes a lot of effort. Yeah.
You can have an idea, but it doesn't quite work out after production.
Yeah.
Well, let's explore like this concept of comfort, durability, and also invisible fit by kind of looking at a cut shoe, right? You sent me a couple shoes,
Yeah.
and one of which I was able to cut, which I loved cutting shoes. It's so fun to see the inside. And I'd love to kind of have you look at a cut shoe. When I look at it, I see Gore-Tex in there, I see invisible fit, and I can explain that, and I have explained that to this community. But I'd
Right.
love to kind of hear your thoughts on some of the comfort
Yeah.
features as we look at a cut shoe. This is my favorite: is to pop up something and then have a person who's been intimately involved in the development of this shoe say like, ah, here's what I see. So
Right.
I see invisible fit because can't see a booty, right? I see that drop liner in there, but actually I see a really unique waffle print on that drop liner. I see several textiles in here. But what do you see when you look at this?
Yeah, great question. So I see a couple of things. First of all, when I look at the outsole, I see those little nubs on the lugs, and those really are a nice little addition that we worked with Vibram on. It's called traction lug.
Hmm.
So normally the lug wall is very plain. Those little nubs are actually creating extra surface area, and that surface area translates into about a 5 to 10% increase in traction, depending on what kind of terrain you're in. So when I look at that cut through that you did, I see some of those nubs, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I remember us working on that with Vibram. That outsole uses Mega Grip, which is a amazing compound for wet and dry traction without giving up durability. I see a midsole that has two densities. So, going back to this sample, yeah, you'll see that there's actually two colors on the EVA, and those are not paint. That's actually two different densities of foam.
Mhm.
So that bottom density creates the shell and it's the structural element, and that tends to be a little harder. And then the main foam that your foot is actually resting on, which is that top layer, is softer. So next to foot, it's softer, it delivers more comfort. Um, and then we also did little other things like, for example, this Kaha 3 uses a polyurethane molded sock liner, not EVA. And we know that PU tends to be more durable, less susceptible to compression set, which is basically pancaking. And especially if you're going to wear a backpack on, EVA can lead to compression set fatigue pretty quickly. So having a PU sock liner is just going to be more durable in terms of cushioning, gives more energy return. Yeah, and then the upper, as we mentioned, has invisible fit, but we used linings that were um, had higher texture rates so that they could bring that moisture away from the shoe
Mm.
to the sock and then eventually evaporate out either up through the shoe or out towards the sides of the shoe.
I can't stress enough, especially as you talked about the sock liner or the insole, like how kind of special that insole is. I know that was one of
Yeah,
the first things I noticed in this shoe as I was taking out the insole. Like this is different, and then for you to tell me it's PU means
yeah,
that it's not going to compress out, right? You're going to
correct.
get the same fit that you got in the store after 30 miles on the trail, right? Because it's not going to
Yeah,
flatten out, and you're not have to tighten your laces as things compress in. That's really that's a cool bonus add-on into there
yeah,
and something to really think about. When you
yeah,
talked about like the wicking layers, is that part of like that heel liner in there? Was that textile sort of selected? Um,
yes,
I also see it underneath the tongue there to be
yeah.
that sort of help with wicking and durability in there.
Yeah, again, that waffle texture really increases the surface area, which promotes more wicking and faster drying because it creates pockets of air and then pockets that actually touch your foot or the sock to allow for moisture transmission to accelerate.
And I love that you have a pretty aggressive shroud on this shoe in the low to help
Yeah.
keep stones out, I assume.
Yeah, we wanted to bring a little bit more protection around the ankle because, we know that generally mid cuts are purchased because they're more protective.
Hmm.
And it comes down to personal preference. Some people prefer mids, some people prefer lows. But when you do pick a low, you do tend to potentially grab little pieces of gravel that may come up as you walk, right foot, left foot, swinging by each other. So that little mini shroud just
Hmm.
hugs the foot a little bit. It doesn't do anything but creates a little bit of a protective layer. It's super soft and pliable. If you actually pick up the shoe, you'll see that it is very pliable. So it doesn't do anything to affect the fit, but it does create a little bit of a mini protection layer to
Yeah.
keep gravel and scree from coming down into the shoe.
Yeah, it's like a micro gator, but it's
Yeah,
not. It doesn't look like it, and it just does a little bit there, and it's really nice
yeah,
and low. And then the fact that you've incorporated in the gasket technology the brand new sort of version of invisible fit that allows for a tongue to open a little bit more does really sort of allows that. From my perspective, having that shroud in the back, you can still get your foot in and out without having to like stretch and weasel that your foot into
yes,
there. It's
yeah,
very well thought out. In terms of durability, like what were you setting out on as far as like I don't want to put miles because everybody's miles are different, but
yeah,
like what are you thinking in the Kaha? I assume it's a little more than a trail running shoe.
yeah. I mean, I think for normal use, you're going to get a couple of years of wear because,
Yeah,
people who hike aren't necessarily using the shoe every day like a runner is.
right.
So you'll get a couple of years of multiple seasons. If you're using it every day, depending on the terrain, the temperature that you're walking in, and things like that, those all change your mileage quite a bit. But we've done a lot of work to make it super durable. So for example, um, you'll see that we actually used TPU, molded TPU on the tip and molded TPU on the heel
Mm,
to really build that additional protection layer that the previous Kaha didn't have. It did have a tip and a heel, but it was made out of die-cut rubber. And this time, because of invisible fit and wanting to preserve the membrane, we didn't want to stitch something through. So we actually molded the toe cap and the heel to the shape of the last. So they do not start out flat. They already have the shape built in so that as we go through the shoemaking process, the shape of the last is preserved through these components. And it also facilitates um, invisible fit from being protected during the
right.
production process.
Yeah, I just for those who don't quite understand, right? Like molded TPU means that you had to mold a different toe cap for different sizes along the size run, right? It's not just a
Correct.
lay on and go. It's like a whole set of tooling that has to be developed.
Yes,
And again, that's that
expensive.
tuning, right? When I look at something like the Speed Goat, I noticed there is a little bit of a protective layer, but that's not a molded protective. That's just put on the shoe. It's a
Yeah,
very
that's just
different.
film. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's film and it's great. But on something like the Kaha, we wanted it to be really bomber
yeah.
and molded TPU that's shaped to the last absolutely delivers on that goal.
Yeah, and it's neat to see that, right? So again, increasing the durability in those high wear zones, those knock
Yeah,
zones. Also a little bumper protection, right, for when you
yeah,
miss
exactly.
that step and kick that rock.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah, so many like different features kind of into this, and I also want to ask about laces because I promised Eduardo I would today with you.
yeah,
These have very unique laces, and I don't know if y'all can see this on here, but these are these like tubular laces that almost have this uh, like 3D effect to them. It's like an optical illusion almost when I look at it. My eyes can't quite focus on them, but it does have some texture to it. What's the story behind those? I've not seen these
yeah.
in the industry, and as shoe nerds, we're all like, "Whoa, there's something new. Let's geek out about it."
So Odile, our designer, fell in love with this lace because of that three-dimensional sort of tricks your eye.
Yeah,
But the texture actually does benefit the lacing. So when you actually tie the lace, that sort of variegated, undulating weave creates more texture so that when you pull on the lace as you're tying it, the knot actually connects easier. So yeah, it looks cool, but it also has a functional benefit that Odile fell in love with and yeah, turned out great.
yeah, and it's I laces in Gore-Tex shoes are actually you're semi-limited into the types of laces you can use in Gore-Tex shoes because your Gore-Tex shoes are going to have to pass the style qualification test, and one of those is like the
Right.
active wicking test, the walking simulator. How are you sort of thinking about the style qualification test as you start to develop, knowing that that's coming, right? Donna's going to run your shoes through the ringer.
Yeah.
What are you considering as you're developing shoes to make sure that they are going to pass the Gore-Tex tests?
So this is where working with Gore-Tex early on makes a huge difference because they're great at guiding us and making sure that we're not sticking our foot, pardon the pun, in the wrong bucket. So they work very closely with our design team, our engineering team to ensure that we're walking down the right path to get to style qualification. So it's a constant back and forth between our design and engineering team, the factory engineering team, and the Gore-Tex engineering team. So that trifecta is constantly iterating back and forth through this loop so that when we go to do the style qualification test, it's literally yep, it's going to do exactly
Right.
what we thought it was going to do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you want it to pass the first time, and part of that is doing the homework and making
yeah,
sure, yeah, you're sourcing the right DWRs on the shoes or the right types of layers,
exactly.
and
Yeah,
to pass the whole shoe breathability test, the centrifuge test, and then the walking simulator test.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and that's our little stamp of our big stamp of approval on these products before they can go off to production. And
yeah.
yeah, right. And it's that cooperative process. It must be interesting to kind of work in that development part to kind of source the proper materials, right? There's some that you would
Yeah,
love to use, but they get thrown out because they wick too much, or
correct.
they can't bond with the invisible fit properly, or something like
Yeah.
that, along the way.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think Gore's been an awesome partner. Obviously PFAS is no longer
mhm.
uh, legal in many states. So developing EPE, which Gore did a while ago, and then sourcing for us the right non-PFAS, non-PFC um, DWR treatments has been, a challenge because
Yeah.
we want to keep the performance that we've had, but do it in a, you know, environmentally considered manner. And I think, again, working with Gore has been great because they have been at the forefront of developing technologies and partners that can meet those requirements.
Mhm. Yeah, it's nice. It's that sharing of information, right? And
Yeah,
we learn along the way as we work with brands, and then we can impart the expertise. Folks like Jonathan Sweigel, who are just hyper focused on wicking, right?
yeah,
um, know what factories do to for anti-wicking treatments, and can advise and tune along the way.
yes,
It's pretty cool. um, and then just learn. And it's really special that your factories are quite unique, right? You are some of the first to market on invisible fit in boots, and that
yeah,
isn't an accident, right? You have the ability to do that because you're HOKA, um, because you've put the
yeah.
work
And
in.
again, the Gore team will tell you they have put a lot of resources against working with the factories and making sure that they understand what the do's and the do nots are in terms of the standard operating procedure. And certain things had to be developed because this is the first time we've done a really truly mid-cut product
Hmm.
with invisible fit. So there were
Yeah,
some special things that our teams, inclusive of Gore, had to work together to develop these processes. So it wasn't a matter of, hey, just take invisible fit and
no.
make it bigger. It was not that. It was really going through a lot of different scenarios. And sometimes those weren't beneficial, so we had to back out and go down another alley. But
Yeah.
ultimately, I think, got to a really great place, and I love where the Kaha 3 has ended up.
Yeah, it's at a really cool place. It's
Yeah.
durable, it's comfortable, and it's functional. And Ben, if you don't mind popping up slide 14, I just want to kind of zoom out again as we sort of move on to the next subject, but just kind of getting your take on like who the Kaha 3 is absolutely right for in context of your broader hike line, right? Here's all of your products as to date. And really help us understand who we would be
Yeah.
slotting into the Kaha 3 from your sort of vast perspective that you have.
Yeah, so thanks for popping this slide up. This is great because it shows like the continuum of product experience that we really work hard to build. And the Kaha 3 sits all the way to the left, which means that it's our most rugged, our most durable, and most cushioned long haul hiker. So if you are someone who is going to go on a 10-mile hike that day, we wanted to make sure this shoe could absolutely do that
Hmm.
with confidence. But if you wanted to just go on a 1 hour hike, you can do that also. And we've done that through styling and color, as I mentioned earlier. So
Right.
the Ka sits sort of at the most rugged, durable uh, positioning in our line. And then as you move to the right, it starts to get lighter, more day hiking, and then all the way to transport, which is where, we see lots of growth happening for our business, which is where we're addressing that new consumer we had touched on earlier.
Hmm. Yeah, right. And building products for them that they might want to consider, like the Transport Chukka, which there is a new transport shoe coming out in the fall, which you've been involved in, the Transport Hike GTX as well as another option.
Yes.
Um,
So we just launched a sandal called the Infini Hike,
uh-huh.
which was on that grid you just showed.
Yeah.
And that sandal was engineered and is engineered to be resolable.
Oh, cool.
We worked very closely with the Vibram team to understand what makes a shoe resolable in a financially sound way. You can resole any shoe, but
Yeah.
The expense is the labor time involved in the process of resoling. So we actually engineered the Infinity Hike to be resolable in less than an hour, which makes it financially a smart way to resole a shoe. So those learnings are going to get adopted into future products. So the Kaha 4 will probably be with a resolable outsole. I'm gonna guess. Yeah.
That's exciting, right? And that is a really
Yeah.
neat sort of
Yeah.
technology. Again, as we get into more responsible technologies, right? Using
Yeah.
recycled, you use non-dyed on the interior of this, right? With Gore, that's
Correct.
more responsible. And longevity and durability, though, are the biggest players in that. But it's got to make sense to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even the Kaha 3 has a lot of sustainable componentry. For example, both the midsoles have 30% sugarcane EVA, which reduces our petro-based ethanol usage. So we're replacing petro-based ethanol with bio-based sugarcane ethanol.
Yep.
Um, we use only gold-rated leather, gold-rated tanneries from the leather working group.
Mhm.
So to get a gold rating in the leather working group structure, you have to do a lot of things around sustainability, like the way you manage your dyes, the way you treat water. Are you recycling the water? What happens to the waste material? Do you use it to power the steam that's used in the rest of the
Mhm.
facility to dry the hides? All of those things are very meticulously mapped in order to achieve leather working group gold status. And
Yeah.
we only use gold status leather at HOKA because we want to make sure that it's the most considered and sustainably achieved method of tanning leather. Um, all the textiles have a high content of recycled polyester,
Yep.
including those magical laces, to make sure that we're doing the right thing of not using virgin materials where possible.
Right. Yeah. Without sacrificing the durability, right? And the
Yeah.
performance of the shoe. And that's really key.
Yeah, including the face fabric of the Gore
Yep.
laminate, that has a 72%, I believe, RPET content. So very high level of recycled yarns in that component as well.
Yeah, as well as the non-woven kind of backer on the other side to kind of help it bond to the leather. So,
Exactly.
and again, non-dyed in that as well. So that's just less resources because you don't have to
Yeah.
dye. So, yeah, a lot is going on there, and I know you have some information on Hoka that you personally have written some articles on the Hoka.com around some
Yeah.
of that, so folks can reference that if you are curious. Um, and I want to just kind of finish a little bit, just a quick hit on kids because that is another part you
Yeah.
do, and I wish maybe I'll invite you back to do a whole hour on kids because it is a fascinating category.
Yeah.
But as the Anacapa Kids came out right last year, I think it was
Yes.
released. That must have been an interesting project to bring, right? It was pretty disruptive to have something that high end
Yeah.
available for kids at that price point.
Yeah.
How how did you get that through? How did all that kind of come to be? I'm just curious what the story around that is.
Well, it all started in 2020 when we started thinking about kids, and we did a lot of strategic research to see where our competitors were, where we thought the white space could be. And what we realized is that many of our competitors, when they do kids product, immediately despec the shoes. So they, use cheaper foams. If there's foam, some don't even use foams. They use
Mm.
lower grade textiles and not very good synthetic. So, I don't want to disparage that, but that
So
was
they were trying
not.
to hit a price point and doing what they're doing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and there's value in that, and we're not judging that. But we felt like for a young athlete, compromising those performance elements just wasn't the right way to do it. So we have a mantra around kids, and it's small sizes, big performance.
Mhm.
That's kind of the sort of two worlds we want to melt together. So the last, for example, is unique to kids' shaped feet. We did not just take an adult's last and shrink it and say, here it is. We actually built it around the morphology of developing feet. So the last is engineered to work for kids' feet shape. Um, and then we use the same materials, to be honest, as we do in adults. So for example, the Anacapa adults and the Anacapa kids use the same midsole. They don't have the same outsole compound
Mhm.
because of price points, but the outsole compound is a sticky rubber, so it is very, very good for wet and dry traction. And then the upper uses full grain nubuck, not synthetic nubuck, and of course has Gore as well on board. So, the goal was to make sure that the product really delivered a performance experience like it does in adults, but engineered for a kid's foot.
Yeah, it was heartening to see, and I think it pushed other brands as well to try to catch up a bit, and you'll be able to sort of start offering higher end kids products out there, and we're my kids are out there doing the same things I am, so
Yeah,
they just, we
exactly.
just got back from a 4-day backpacking trip in southern Utah, right? And they did all the miles that I put on, so yeah,
Yeah,
they're good shoes too. Well, hi, it's thanks for sort of sharing some of that and giving some perspective on the kids. It's really cool, and I love seeing what you and your team have been developing there, and look forward to the future of some of the kids' products as well. And I'm sure
yeah.
for
Well,
anybody
thanks for
knowledgeable,
letting us share that as well.
yeah, it's pretty cool. So, hi, just as we kind of wrap up, what do you want to leave us with, right? We've talked about you being really consumer focused, right? And
Yeah.
consumers should know that a shoe's out there. We've talked about some of the different components that have gone into this to maximize comfort, durability, and sort of premium components in this. But what would you like folks to kind of leave the taste in their mouth from this call? Just something you really want to reiterate here for us.
Yeah, I think it's along the same lines, Marshall, around being consumer centric. And our teams work really diligently to look at where your lives are shifting and to develop products accordingly. So one of the things you touched on was we will be launching this fall, and I'm going to give people a quick peek at this.
Yeah, do it.
The Transport Hike, which is here. It uses the same designed midsole as the regular Transport, but we did a more luggy outsole.
Mm.
It too has those traction lug details. And then the upper has a very versatile but functional upper design. So we took all the learnings from the regular Transport and built in that sort of additional layer of functionality for hike. So it's got more rugged meshes. It's got quick hook hardware, which you would see on hiking products. The collar is a lower chukka height, which again fits in with what you are doing and what you're
Yeah,
needing.
more accessible for the
Yeah,
transport, right? It doesn't need to be a big
yeah.
lid.
And if someone really wants that higher collar, hey, we got you covered, no
Yeah,
problem, right
absolutely.
there. Yeah. So that's an exciting Gore-Tex product that's coming in fall shortly. So we're excited about that as well.
Right, and just another sort of option for folks. It's
Yeah,
really kind of neat to see these, like, as Melanie's saying, you don't make a shoe for everyone. You make shoes for everyone, right? It's sort of
yeah,
and there's the right shoe for the right person. I love that there's sort of
yeah,
tuning these for specific taste and needs, but they all look great, and that's kind of cool.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, shout out to our design and engineering team. They do such an amazing job and
they really do.
makes my life easier when I talk about shoes because they've done all the hard work. So, I've got to elevate their work for sure.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean, you've assembled an amazing team, and it shows,
Yeah.
and just in these high quality products. Well, hi, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure on the Experience More tour to have you, to have somebody with your caliber of knowledge has been great. And on behalf of Gore-Tex and Experience More tour, thank you to you, and thank you to everybody for watching today. This has been a real pleasure. So thank you so much, Hi.
Thank you, Marshall, and thank you, Gore, and thanks for everyone who's on the call. Appreciate
Yeah,
you.
thank you.